Hey, how's it going? It's Stephen here from understandingaudio.com, and today I want to talk a little bit about reverb. More specifically, I want to talk about plate reverb. Now, the reason why I'm talking about plate reverb specifically is because SoundToys recently gave away their Little Plate reverb plugin for free. This video is in no way sponsored by SoundToys. I picked up the plugin for free like everybody else, and I used it on a mix, and I want to share with you the results. First, let's very briefly do a quick science recap on reverb. Reverb occurs naturally when a sound bounces off a surface or an object and it's reflected back to our ears. Any enclosed space is going to have a reverb effect present unless it's something like an anechoic chamber. You get an initial sound like when somebody walks into a room and claps their hands, and then you get reflections of that sound bounce from the various surfaces in that space, like the walls or the floor. You've got both early reflections and then you've got thicker reflections that bounce around the room a lot more. The combined term for those reflections is reverb, and that is a very quick summary. The purpose of adding reverb to a recording during the mixing phase as an effect is to add ambience and space. It's a similar idea to using room mics during the recording phase, only that the reverb added in mixing is artificial. As mentioned, the particular type of reverb I want to talk about today is plate reverb. Plate reverb is completely unnatural, man-made and artificial, and a plate reverb unit is quite literal in that it's a metal plate in a wooden box. An input transducer sends a signal or excites the plate, and output transducers act as a pickup and pick up the vibrations and send them on to the engineer. Now you might be asking what input transducers and output transducers are, and to give you some context, an example of an input transducer is a microphone, an example of an output transducer is a speaker. Now the EMT140 was the first plate reverb to be created, and that was by a German company. EMT is an abbreviation of their name. I am not going to try and pronounce it. And it uses a magnetic transducer to vibrate a sheet of metal and acts exactly like I just described. If you think about a sheet of metal, it is a two-dimensional 2D object, whereas a room is a 3D space. So it's giving you a completely different sound to what you would normally expect from a reverb. The EMT140 itself is a huge piece of hardware. It weighs around 600 pounds, and to get one of these units is quite difficult because they're very hard to find. So it's amazing to have a plug-in variation. So that's exactly what SoundToys have done. They collected 5 of the original EMT140 units, did a lot of deep research, sciencey stuff, and then developed this plugin. Now, from my own personal perspective, I really like using plate reverbs on vocals and snare drums. That's not to say you can't use it on anything you want to. That's just my personal preference of where I like to use them. Sometimes I use them on other elements as well, but that's primarily where you'll see me using them. In particular, I really like to use plate reverbs on a pop lead vocal. The reason why is because plate reverbs give you a nice metallic brightness or effect to the sound that a lot of natural reverbs don't. Even emulations of rooms and halls don't give you that same brightness because it is a completely artificial sound from a two-dimensional sheet of metal. Plate reverbs also work very well with other types of reverb. For example, if you have a drum kit and as part of the recording process, some room mics have been used, there's a natural ambience that those room mics will give when they're mixed in to complement the sound of the close mics on the drum kit. Plate reverbs will work really well to blend in with that natural room sound that you've already got captured. So before I move on and play you some audio examples of the Little Plate by SoundToys, let me open up the plugin and show you some of the features. It is an electromechanical reverb, as I mentioned, inspired by the original EMT140 plate reverb. SoundToys themselves have said that this little plugin has some modern digital twists on the hardware, and I have found that to be very true. The really cool thing about this reverb is that the decay time is a lot different to the hardware. The EMT140 itself has a decay time of around 5 seconds, but the digital twist that you'll see with this plugin is that you can set it from 0.5 seconds, so 500 milliseconds, all the way up to infinity. So when we're talking about reverb, the very simple way of thinking about decay is the time in seconds it takes for that reverb to trail off and disappear. If you think of a piece of rotting food, that also decays, and over time that will disappear. With the options that we have here with this infinity setting, that bad smell that you get from that rotting food will never go away. And in this case, your reverb tail will never go away unless you fade it out yourself or automate it out. There's a weird analogy for you. This plugin also has a low cut, and I like to add EQ to my reverbs like I know a lot of other engineers do. So this is very cool. You can do it within the plugin. You don't need to add another plugin after, although I have added another plugin after it. And you can also modulate the tail of the reverb. I quite often add modulation to synths or elements of the mix that I feel need a bit of movement or need a bit of excitement. And I think it's very cool that this reverb plugin has modulation built into it, because if you don't want to add it directly to the signal itself, or you don't want to create a new sound just for modulation, you can click this switch and you have the modulation within the reverb itself. Now let me get on to how I've used this plugin within my mix on my lead vocal. So I've got my friend JD here belting out verse 2 of his song, and I'm going to play the lead vocal first with all of the processing on.
And now the nights are lone, you got no place to go, because you're on your own, no agents on the phone saying...
So quite obviously, I've done some EQ, compression and de-essing on that lead vocal. There's also some volume automation within the track itself. This lead vocal send is going to a parallel compression bus, and I also have some modulation and pitch adjustments going on from this send as well on separate buses. I've also got some slap delay, another delay with a quarter note and an eighth note on one side, and this is actually being sent to a guitar stereo delay that I implemented a lot later in the mix. Then finally, we got the lead vocal reverb send, and that is sending directly to this little plate reverb. Before it hits the plate, I've got a de-esser controlling some more of the high-end information. Because it is such a bright reverb, I don't want to have too much going into it, so I'm controlling that before it even hits the plate. On the way out of the reverb, I've got an REQ, and that is removing some of the low frequency information, removing some of that bass buildup, even though I've used the low cut already. And I've also removed actually quite a lot of the high-end information from about 2.5K upwards. Now going back to the plate plugin itself, I messed around with a lot of presets just to get a feel for how the plugin worked, and I came across this underground vocals preset, and I think it works really well. So let's just listen to that reverb on its own without the delay and the other sends in play.
And now the nights are lone, you got no place to go, because you're on your own, no agents on the phone saying...
Now you can hear the metallic sound of the reverb in that decay or the reverb tail at the end of the playback there. And I really love that about this plugin and about plate reverbs in general, that really bright sound, as I've already mentioned. And this is quite a poppy vocal, so it's really cool. Another cool thing about plate reverbs that I find is that when you raise the level of the send, how much you're actually sending into the reverb unit itself, it doesn't push the vocal noticeably way further back into the mix like you'll get with a hall reverb or something like that. You can keep a nice upfront vocal sound and add some plate reverb and brightness to it without affecting too much how it's placed within the mix and the front to back placement of the vocal. Let me demonstrate that for you.
And now the nights are lone, you got no place to go, because you're on your own, no agents on the phone saying...
So what I'm sure you'll have noticed there is that the level of that reverb goes up and surrounds the lead vocal, but the lead vocal itself doesn't disappear, it's still nice and upfront. So that's what I've used on this mix, but while I have the plugin open, I just want to show you some of the other settings and presets that come with it that you can play around with. If I was first of all to use this existing preset and just increase the decay time, let's see what that would sound like.
And now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go.
All right, that got pretty intense when it went all the way up to infinity. It was almost like a crowd sound in the background supporting the lead vocal itself. When I pulled it back to the 500 millisecond sound, it was also pretty cool. You'd still have that metallic sound of the plate reverb. And keep in mind that I'm not sending a huge amount of level into the reverb unit. If I increase that, it would also make the effect a lot more noticeable. So let's do that and play around with some of the other presets.
And now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place
There's
to
that
go
modulation setting working on the reverb tail.
on your own. No agents on the phone.
Pretty intense.
Saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are.
Let me just flip back to the setting that I used. As I mentioned earlier, I've got some delay units in place before the reverb. You'll notice that there's no pre-delay setting on the reverb itself because there wouldn't be on a plate itself. But if you add a delay before this plugin, you're creating the pre-delay yourself. And pre-delay, all that means is that you're delaying the time between the initial source, the initial sound itself, and the start of the early reflections. So I'll play back the lead vocal with the reverb on once again, and I'll gradually bring in my delay effects as playback continues.
And now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone.
So I think it's pretty cool how those delays interact with this plate reverb, and I think it gives me a really nice, bright pop lead vocal. So let's hear it in the mix.
And now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the.
Now I'll play back the lead vocal in the context of the mix without these ambient delay and plate reverb effects.
And now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own.
First of all, we'll bring in the reverb.
No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone saying, and now the nights are lone. You got no place to go because you're on your own. No agents on the phone.
So there you have it, a really nice, bright, subtle plate reverb effect on a lead pop vocal using the Little Plate by SoundToys. That's just one preset and one application I've used of this little plate on a lead vocal. As I demonstrated earlier, you can be as drastic or as subtle as you want with this effect. For this mix, I chose a quite nice, subtle, bright reverb, but you can go nuts with this plugin if you want. Try this plugin out and try plate reverbs out on your lead vocals, snares, try it out on any element that you see fit. Play around with the decay and the dry and wet knob, the low cut, try out as much as you want and use this effect the way you want and the way that suits your mix. There's no right or wrong way to use this. Give it a go and see what results you come up with. Okay, so adding reverbs and delays to your mix is a really important stage of the mixing process. You start being able to feel out the width and depth of your mix when it gets to that stage. And if you're a little confused by this or you just want to improve, because in my book and for me personally, there's always room to improve, then I've got something for you. I've got one super valuable, really easy to use hack that you can use throughout every stage of your mix, including this stage of adding reverbs and delays. Rather than you having to listen to me continue going on about it in this video, I've put together a free guide for you that you can download and read at your leisure. It's called The One Hack That Guarantees a Unique Pro Sounding Mix, and you can download it for free at getpromixes.com. Before you go download the guide, or if you have it already, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you're feeling really generous, leave a comment below and let me know, what's your favorite type of reverb and what do you use it on? I'll be back with another new video very soon. In the meantime, you can watch all the rest of my videos, and I hope you have a great time making music.